this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is the Razer Viper Ultimate. This is a premium wireless gaming mouse from Razer with some very nice specifications and a premium price tag. It's an ambidextrous gaming mouse with 8 programmable buttons and some serious specs that include up to 70 hours battery life with Razer's HyperSpeed wireless technology, 20,000 max DPI, 650 max speed IPS, 50 Gs of acceleration, optical switches, and a lot more besides. Now, the Viper Ultimate is an interesting alternative to the Basilisk Ultimate. It's obviously also an addition to the Viper lineup, which includes the Viper Mini and the 8K, which I've recently looked at, and so an interesting option. It also comes, as you'll see, with its own charging base station, which makes it theoretically convenient. A bit more on that later on. Now, as I said, this is a premium mouse with a number of nice features to it. You'll see it's fairly understated in its design, but it's designed to be ambidextrous. I say it's true ambidextrous. It has 8 programmable buttons. You have 2 side buttons on either side and a very sort of symmetrical design. In the box, you get the mouse itself, the little charging station, the usual gumph, and a micro USB charging cable. That's a Speedflex cable, so it's obviously designed to be loose and floppy and easy to move around on the desk should you want to flick it about in wired mode. Although if you get it right and use it properly, you won't need to use it in wired mode, and it will be available to be used exclusively in wireless and make the most of that HyperSpeed wireless technology. And this mouse is designed to give you extremely low latency, so you have accurate response. And as I said, up to 70 hours of battery life. There's 5 onboard memory profiles and 8 programmable buttons, and more on that as we go through. I'm also going to show you how to customize it and what you can do with it within Razer's Synapse Software at the end of the video, so stick with me for that. Now, one of the highlights is worth talking about is that this has optical switches as well, so we'll cover that in a bit more depth in a minute. But for now, we're going to talk about the overall design of it. As you'll see, the underside has some slick PTFE feet, and these are actually very nice. It's very swift on the desk. Also has a little dock for docking the wireless dongle when not in use, so somewhere to store it when you're not using it. If you want to take it around with you somewhere, you'll know where that is, so you can get easy access to it. That does also plug into the charging station, so that's worth noting. And on the underside, you'll also see there's a power switch for turning it on and off, and also a little button which allows you to switch between the profiles. When you do turn it on, you'll note there's only one RGB lighting zone, and that is on the logo. It's worth mentioning that the RGB lighting isn't too in your face here. You have some RGB lighting also on the charging base station, which you can see here. There's a ring around the bottom which lights up. One thing that I really do like about it is that both the lighting on the logo and on the base station will change color when the battery's getting low, so you have a visual cue to let you know that you need to plug it in or to dock it in order to charge it. And it's that docking functionality which makes this convenient, because when you're not using it, when you've finished using it for the day or for any period, you can just dock it onto that charging dock and then replenish the battery. So in theory, if you remember to do this, you will never have to plug it in, which is obviously a bonus for a wireless device, because there's nothing more annoying than having to plug something in. The base station, charging station itself, has a rubberized base, and so it sits on the desk and won't move around terribly easily. However, I will note that I did find the process of docking onto these pins a little bit fiddly. That's not a problem I remember having with the Basilisk Ultimate, but for some reason the Viper Ultimate I found a bit fiddly, and I think it's worth talking about why. It's a fairly straightforward affair. You'll see it has these charging pins on the top of it, and those basically go inside the holes on the bottom of the mouse, but it is a bit of a faff to get on. You'll see those 2 pins there. There's also a recessed area where the mouse essentially slides onto the dock, and there seems to be several different ways to get it onto the dock. You can either just pop it on top if you know the rough position, or you can sort of slide it down from the top to the bottom and then basically dock in those pins in there. Now quickly, I'm just going to show you what I was talking about earlier on. So you can take the HyperSpeed wireless dongle out of the mouse. Now you can plug this into your PC, obviously, and that gives you that wireless connectivity and a good solid connection. But the other option you have is there's a USB port on the charging station. So you can plug the charging station into your PC and then plug the dongle into that, which extends the range of it, but also means that you only need one slot on your PC with a USB port. So you either have the charging cable or the dongle or both, or you just have the charging cable plugged into the base station and then your dongle plugged into that, and therefore you're only using one port on the PC, which is nice. But docking the mouse is a bit fiddly. At least this is my experience. Now, I am a bit clumsy, it's worth noting. You might not have a problem with it. I found, as I said, there's different ways to put it on. You can sort of slide it on from the top because of that recess and the way that works. You'll see the pin sort of push in and then it clicks into place. However, I found that I had to mess about with it a bit in order to sort of work out the logic of this. You can also just drop it down on top if you know the position of where those pins are. But again, quite fiddly, and I've got a little bit of footage here to show you it, but I did a behind the scenes video where I went into more depth on showing just how fiddly that was, and I had numerous takes where I was trying to get that footage captured and actually found it a real faff to get on. I thought it was worth talking about. However, despite that, obviously once you get used to how it works, the convenience of having a charging station makes it really easy, and also I really like the fact that it changes colour to let you know when you're running low on battery as well, because you have that visual cue immediately. It's just there, striking. There's nothing to worry about. You're not going to run low on battery because you'll just see it. Now, another thing that people might not approve of is it's a micro USB charging cable, not USB-C. I know that really rubs people up the wrong way sometimes, but it does say top on the top of it, so you can't get it the wrong way around. It's fairly straightforward to plug it into the base station. And obviously, if you've missed the notifications about getting low on battery and you're starting to run low while playing games and you're going to be carrying on playing or working, you can just take the cable out of the charging dock and dock it into the mouse. And obviously you can then carry on using it in wired mode, and there's no interruptions to your service there. And so that is obviously a bonus, although it is micro USB, so it is fiddly. But again, you can't get it the wrong way around because of the logo, the way it's sat. It just clicks into place. Now, a little bit on the design of the mouse while we're talking about it. I found this to be a fairly large mouse that fits nicely in my hand. Obviously, it has that ambidextrous design, so it's designed to work with both left and righties. So whatever you prefer, whichever way you like to use your mouse, you should be fine with this one. It has side buttons on either side, so you have two thumb buttons on either side, and you can customize those within the software. And the Hypershift technology also means that you can program secondary actions for those buttons as well. More on that later when I go into the software, but that basically means that you have access to a multitude of buttons. I've also found the buttons to be satisfying in their action. There's no excess wobble or anything like that. And the mouse wheel is also nicely textured and satisfying to use. It doesn't have any sideways press in it, sadly, which is a real shame. I also really like the overall texture of the side grips. You'll see there's some large textured grips on there. The mouse also has a semi-rough finish to it, so it's not slippery in the hand. One problem that I will note, though, sadly, is that those side buttons are a little bit too recessed for me. I felt that they were difficult to feel and press with ease, which was a slight frustration when using the mouse. They are a bit of a faff. They're not easy to feel or to access. Now, this just might be the way I hold my mouse or what I'm used to in general from other mice, but I've just found it's not as comfortable in terms of the access to those side buttons, which is a bit frustrating if you're playing an FPS game where you need to be able to get access to them quickly because you use them for various things. I use mine for melee or spotting enemies, for example, in battle royales and FPS games. So if you're using them for sort of commands like that, then it's a bit of a pain. However, they can be programmed independently, and you can also customize a multitude of different settings within the Razer Synapse software, so it's pretty straightforward. Overall, a nice size, nice shape, and a nice fit in the hand. I do personally prefer having a thumb rest on the left, but obviously because this is ambidextrous, it has to be designed in a certain way that will fit in every sort of hand. Now, there's no DPI switching button as default. As I said, you've got that profile switching button on the underside, but you can customize buttons to be a DPI switch or a clutch for your DPI to drop into a lower DPI level. So it's possible to change those settings too. So what you're seeing is a very nice mouse with a number of really nice features to it. It has some pretty insane specs. Obviously that 20,000 DPI is pretty bonkers. I don't think that's necessary. However, I found it comfortable to use. I've been using it all day for working and for gaming. I found that I rarely had to charge it. As I said, it can get up to 70 hours of charge out of it. The optical mouse switches also offer a 0.2 millisecond response to really low latency registration of your clicks. And I've certainly found that I've not had any problems with the accuracy or speed of this mouse. It's been a joy to use, and despite having buttons on both sides, I've not found I've accidentally pressed those side buttons when I didn't mean to as well, which is certainly something nice. I do wish it had a bit more RGB lighting on it. If RGB is your bag, then you'll probably be disappointed in this. However, it is nicely understated and it has a really nice aesthetic to it. Doing a comparison shot here with the Logitech G502 Lightspeed, because I'm going to be doing a separate video to compare the two in the near future. So if you're interested in that, please check back soon to see that. As you'll see, the difference between them is quite striking. This Razer mouse is very much a Viper mouse, very much a Razer feel to it, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I have thoroughly enjoyed this mouse. So now I'm going to dive into the Razer Synapse software and show you what's possible in there. Here we are within Razer Synapse software. As you'll see, there are a number of different controls here. Immediately you'll notice that the mouse use is set to right-handed, and you can switch between the two here. And you'll notice the left and right click swap around, so that's one of the things. You'll also see that the side buttons are marked as mouse button 4 and 5 on both sides, so the default they basically do the same action. But you can customize them. Once you click on them, you can select from a number of different options in here. You'll also note the underneath button is a cycle up sensitivity stages, so that goes through your DPI levels. And again, you can customize all of these buttons. One of the things that shines for me about the Viper Ultimate is the ability to go into Hypershift mode. Though Hypershift is basically a secondary layer of actions whereby you can essentially set up different button presses when you're holding a Hypershift button. So if we pick mouse button 4, for example, you can set that as your Hypershift button. Now when I press and hold that, it will then switch into the Hypershift mode. So when I'm pressing and holding that, it switches into the secondary mode, and then you can assign a completely different action to one of the other buttons. So for example, we could have a sensitivity clutch on the front. We'll drop that down to 100 DPI. So now when I press and hold the mouse button 4 and then press 5, that drops you right down into a really low sensitivity that you could use like a sniper button. Yes, that requires 2 button presses, but essentially means that you can access a multitude of buttons. But when you release the Hypershift button, you then still have this as mouse button 5 or whatever you programmed it to. So you essentially, although I'm using one button up for the Hypershift, then have access to a multitude of other buttons that you can program. So although there's 8 programmable buttons as standard, there's actually a lot more once you get into the Hypershift, which is one of the best things about this mouse and Razer's setup in general with any mouse that happens to have Hypershift on it. As you'll see, you can set it to bind to certain key presses. You can enable left and right click or certain buttons. You can have a turbo button for that. You can adjust the sensitivity stages. You can set 5 profiles within the Razer Synapse software. You can set onboard profiles for different actions, and then you can have a button that switches between them. You can change your lighting effects. You can launch specific programs, multimedia, Windows shortcuts, text functions, and other things. So there's loads of different possible actions in here, which is pretty cool. One thing that I have noted, and unless I'm missing it entirely, is there's no macro recording section here, so you can't actually record any macros, which is weird, but you can record a keyboard function and rebind buttons to certain things, and obviously have that turbo set up, so you can choose from doing things like that. I'm not too fussed because I don't often use macros, but if it is something you want to do, it's worth bearing in mind. You'll also note there's a gauge to tell you the current battery life. Now when you go into sensitivity levels, as I said, this goes up to 20,000 DPI. You can set it in up to 5 stages, or you could reduce it down to 2. The button on the underside switches between the DPI levels. You'll see if I press that button now, it goes between them. And you also get a little notification in Windows that pops up and lets you know. If you don't see that notification, you can actually tell which level you're on by looking at the underside of the mouse. You'll notice the little arrows, the color arrows on top of these stages. Those arrows actually appear on the indicator just above the button when you press it, so you'll actually know if you memorize that blue is 1600, for example, or whatever you've set it to, then you'll know when you look at the underside of the mouse that's the level you're on. I find it a bit weird to have the DPI button on the underneath. I like to have it a bit more easy access, but the fact that it's there is still nice. And obviously, again, that's another button that you could customize potentially. Lighting, you'll see you have the settings for it in here. You can adjust the brightness and you can set it to turn off. Calibration is all about calibrating, smart calibrating the surface you're on, and then power, you can set it to manage your power and to go to sleep at a certain time to save battery life. And low power modes, as I said, is pretty decent with the power settings anyway. The other thing you'll see is that in Synapse Software you'll also see the chroma dock listed in here, and what you'll note is there aren't many things that you can do in here, but you can see the different lighting effects. So this will warn you when the mouse battery is low, and you can see that the battery on the mouse needs charging, and you have various different lighting effects for that. So when it gets down to here, and it really is a noticeable change. As standard, it just has the normal sort of lighting on it. And when the mouse is placed on the charging dock, you'll get an indication, but also even when it's not on the charging dock, both will just suddenly light up at this specific color. So when we get down to here and it's got low and critical battery, you'll see it suddenly change color, and it's really noticeable, and it's really handy. Simple little thing. So there you go, you can see the various different controls you can do in it. The Hypershift is obviously one of the most powerful and most interesting functions of this mouse, in my humble opinion, and make it well worth considering. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, and be sure to check back soon for Versus video against the G502 Lightspeed. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well, and have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel, and most importantly, have a great life.